Tammy Oldham had always felt that the ocean spoke to her in a language few could understand, a language of silence and power, calm and chaos. When she met Richard Sharp, a skilled British sailor with sunburned skin and eyes that gleamed like the horizon, she felt her soul anchor for the first time. Together, they dreamed not of houses or cities, but of endless water and faraway lands. So when a wealthy couple asked them to deliver a 44-foot yacht named Hazana from Tahiti to San Diego, it wasn't just an opportunity, it was destiny. The morning they set sail, the sea was calm, wrapped in a golden dawn that promised adventure. The gentle breeze brushed against their faces, and the sail flapped softly like a heartbeat in rhythm with the ocean. Tammy stood barefoot on the deck, hair dancing in the wind, as Richard smiled from the helm. Everything felt infinite. They cooked together, sang to the waves, and took turns steering through the glittering expanse of blue. Every sunrise brought laughter, and every sunset brought stories whispered under the stars. It was more than a voyage, it was a love story written by the sea itself. But on the 12th day, the radio crackled with a warning. A storm, forming east of them, was growing into something monstrous, Hurricane Raymond. Richard looked at the map, his brow tightening. "We can't outrun it," he said quietly. "But maybe we can face it smart." Tammy's heart sank, but she trusted him completely. They lowered sails, secured lines, and tied everything they could. The wind began as a whisper but soon turned into a scream. By evening, the sky had changed colors, from soft blue to angry gray, and the waves rose like mountains. The boat tilted and groaned, the ropes straining as if alive. Richard shouted over the roaring wind, "Stay below deck, Tammy!" She obeyed, clutching the cabin walls as every crash of water sounded like thunder tearing the world apart. The night descended, but there was no darkness. Lightning split the sky into pieces, illuminating Richard above, fighting the storm, his body silhouetted against the chaos. Water poured into the cabin, and Tammy pumped it out with shaking hands, praying under her breath. Every second felt like an hour. Then came the roar, the sound of something massive snapping. The mast. It broke like a bone, crashing across the deck. "Richard!" she screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the storm. He looked back once, eyes fierce, then unhooked himself to secure the sail. The next wave came higher than all before it, a wall of water that towered over the yacht. It struck with unimaginable force. The world turned upside down. She felt herself thrown, tumbling through air and salt water, her body spinning until everything went black. When she opened her eyes, she was lying face down in the flooded cabin. Her head throbbed, her ears rang, and the world was eerily silent. The storm had passed. The boat was half sunken, broken but afloat. She pulled herself up, calling Richard's name. Oh! When Martin finally opened his eyes, the world was not the same. The ceiling above him was white, smooth, and lined with faint reflections of light that blinked rhythmically like a heartbeat. His throat felt dry, and every breath sounded like it came from somewhere far away, as if he were underwater. He blinked again, slower this time, trying to remember the last thing he had seen before everything went dark. A cold October night. Tires screeching. A flash of headlights. Then nothing. 19 years had passed since that moment, but to Martin, it felt like a single breath. He didn't know he had been asleep for almost 2 decades. He tried to move his hand, but the effort felt like lifting a mountain. His muscles resisted him, stiff and foreign. He turned his head slightly and saw a woman sitting beside his bed, older, her face carved with time, yet somehow familiar. She was crying silently, hands trembling as she reached out to touch his face. "Martin!" she whispered, her voice breaking like a fragile thread. He looked at her in confusion. "Who are you?" he asked weakly. The woman froze. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the steady beeping of the monitor. "I'm your wife," she finally said, her voice filled with both joy and heartbreak. "You've been asleep for 19 years. The words didn't make sense. 19 years? He wanted to laugh, but his voice caught in his throat. His mind raced, searching for a memory, any clue that could explain this impossible truth. But his last memory was still that night, the headlights, the crash, the silence. Now everything had changed. His wife, once in her 20s, was now a woman in her 40s. His own reflection in the small mirror by the bed showed an unfamiliar man. His hair was thinner, his face older, and his eyes sunken as though they carried the weight of all the years he had lost. He tried to sit up, but his body trembled violently. A nurse rushed in, gently holding him down. "Easy," she said softly. "Your body isn't ready yet." The room smelled of antiseptic and something faintly metallic. Machines surrounded him, each one humming a quiet tune of life. Through the window, the world outside was bright and fast, cars that didn't look like the ones he remembered, people staring at screens he had never seen before, buildings taller and sharper than his imagination could have built. It felt like waking up in the future. When the doctor came in, his tone was gentle but clinical. "Martin, you were in a car accident 19 years ago. You suffered a severe brain injury and fell into a coma. But somehow, your body never gave up." Martin's lips trembled. "And now? Now you're awake," the doctor said, almost in awe. "Against all odds." But being awake didn't mean being alive, not yet. Martin's world was a blur of faces he barely knew, voices that carried pieces of his past. His parents were gone. His younger brother was now a middle-aged man with children of his own. His wife told him stories. Weeks turned into months, and though Martin's body slowly began to remember how to live, his mind still wandered between the past and the present like a lost traveler trying to find home. Every morning, he woke to a world that felt slightly more familiar yet endlessly strange. The television spoke in a language he once knew but now filled with new words. Apps, AI, social media, things that meant nothing to the man who had fallen asleep in the early 2000s. He watched cars glide silently down the road, machines answering voices, and screens replacing faces. It was both fascinating and terrifying. But deeper than that confusion was the ache of knowing that the world had continued without him. He had once been a man with plans, a new job, a honeymoon, a life waiting to unfold. Now, all that waited for him was recovery. One morning, as light filtered through the hospital blinds, Martin's wife, Emily, placed a small box in his lap. Inside were photos, yellowed edges, frozen moments of laughter and love. "You should see what you missed," she said softly. His fingers trembled as he picked up a picture of their wedding day. They were both smiling, young and reckless, holding hands under a sky full of promise. Then another photo, his parents, who were gone now. Another, his brother, older, grayer, a stranger wearing his sibling's smile. Martin's chest tightened. Each photograph was like a window into a life he could see but never touch. "It's like watching someone else's story," he whispered. Emily smiled sadly. "It's still yours." But it didn't feel like it. When he looked in the mirror, he saw a man with 19 years of missing memories etched into his face. Sometimes he'd close his eyes and still feel the crash, the screeching tires, the blinding lights, the sound of shattering glass. The doctor told him these were phantom memories, fragments of trauma stitched into his subconscious. Yet to Martin, they were the only thing that felt real. His therapist encouraged him to write, to rebuild his timeline through words. So, with shaky hands, Martin began keeping a journal. "Day 1 of remembering," he wrote. "The world feels like a movie I wasn't invited to watch." He wrote about his frustration, about feeling like a ghost haunting a future that wasn't his. But as days passed, something inside him shifted. He began noticing the beauty in this new world, the way lights danced across glass buildings, the laughter of children chasing drones instead of kites, the kindness of strangers who had only known his name through newspaper headlines. The story of the man who woke up after 19 years had gone viral, and people sent him letters, gifts, even video messages. "You give us hope," one message said. "You're proof that miracles happen." But Martin didn't feel like a miracle. He felt like a man who had died and come back to find his life taken by time. One afternoon, Emily took him to their old house, the one she had kept after the accident. As he entered the